Hello again. G. Michael Vasey with another episode of my podcast series. And this week I'm talking to Don Allison, a veteran journalist and author, a lifelong resident of Williams County, Ohio, where he shares a historic home with his wife Diane. And we started talking about some of the things that happened to him and his wife in this home, even whilst they were renovating it prior to moving in. Some of this activity spurred his interest in the paranormal. He describes himself as a skeptic still, but he also has an interest in history, the American Civil War in particular. They live close to Gettysburg, and so he's ended up actually doing some paranormal investigation, not only in his own local area, but also at Gettysburg, and written a couple of books on the Gettysburg paranormals. So I got talking to Don about his home and some of the strange events that he experienced there. Here he is.
Yes, it's an interesting place.
Tell me all about it.
Well, when we purchased the house, it was in very bad shape. There's no way we could actually live in it. We needed to do quite a bit of work ahead. I would just have really strange things happen. I would hear footsteps, very clear footsteps when no one was there. Electronic devices would malfunction. We did not have electricity turned on in the house. The wiring was quite old, so any work we did after dark, I would have a generator going with lights and tools and so forth. But battery-powered radios would change stations, turn on or turn off by themselves. We would sometimes hear voices, just all sorts of things. But soon after we purchased the house, we were outside, and a gentleman pulled in the drive. It's in a rural area. He came running over to us and said, "Do you know this house is haunted?" And my wife and I looked at each other like, well, no, but turns out he had lived in the house for, I think, 24 years. He was an intelligent fellow. He was a music teacher, and he proceeded to tell us some things that happened in the house. And my wife and I looked at each other, and my initial reaction was, this explains the half-empty booze bottles we're finding hidden in different places around the house.
Right.
But he left. We were nice to him. He seemed like a nice, sincere person. But lo and behold, some of the things he shared with us, we experienced the exact same thing. The most striking is I would be working downstairs, usually after dark, and I would hear footsteps. It sounded like a barefoot child starting in the south bedroom, running across the floor of the middle bedroom above, then across the hallway and into the north bedroom, and the door would slam. You could even hear the metallic click of the old latch. The odd part about this, though, was at this point, the floor in the middle bedroom was so water damaged that it would not have held the weight even of a child in spots. And the door that I would hear close and the latch click was actually stuck partway open. You could not budge it. And I would go upstairs and investigate, and nothing. It definitely was not an animal. If it had been, I would have seen it, heard it. The dust upstairs was quite thick. There were no footprints in the dust. And this happened several times. The one that really got my attention, though, that really got me going, because I had no interest in the paranormal, no belief in the paranormal. I was very skeptical, although I still remain a skeptic. I was cutting floorboards. It was after dark. I had, of course, the generator going for lights and had a radio going, playing classic rock. Yeah. And every time a loud, kind of rowdy song came on the radio turned off. And after the third time, I was irritated. And this is the first time I had done this. I spoke out loud and I said, "Look, I like this music. I want to listen to my music. Leave the radio alone." And I went back to work. And I recall this song very clearly. It was Elton John's "Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting." That song came on. The radio did not turn off. The generator outside turned off. leaving me in the dark and the silence. And I just had to laugh.
Yeah.
What can I do? It's like, yeah, you got me. And that's really when I really began to embrace what's going on. And I was never frightened, just really interested in what it could be.
And you say you heard voices as well?
Yes, the first time I heard a voice, my wife and I had been working on the house, and it was getting to be too dark to see very easily. So we were going to go home. She had forgotten her purse, and she left it inside the main front door on the steps. So I unlocked the door. I came in, and as I'm picking up the purse, a very clear female voice whispered in my ear, "Be sure the door's locked." And I was stunned by that. No one was
Yes.
there, and it was clear as could be. I made sure I locked the door on my way out.
And you did move into this house then?
Yes, we have lived here for about 7 years now.
And you still experience strange footsteps and voices?
Yes, we do.
Oh.
Visitors to the house do. Smells. We will frequently smell like a sweet tobacco smoke. We will smell, it's like an old lilac perfume. And we will also smell like a liniment, like something I associate with an older person, perhaps in a nursing home from years ago. That smell reminds me of visiting a nursing home, actually, back in the 1960s. When we had first moved in, we hadn't lived in the house more than a week or two. It was after dark. I was here in my office where I am now, which is a former bedroom in the oldest part of the house. I heard somebody walking down the hallway. I thought, well, it's too early for Diane to be home, so I hollered out, "Hello," and the steps stopped. I got up, looked in the hallway, no one was there. I came back and sat down. Right after I sat down, the steps resumed. They came down the hall into this room. As the steps passed between me and my desk that has a lamp across the room, the shape of a human figure, shadow, was cast on the wall. As the steps went past me, I could feel a distinct cold. The steps continued on into the adjoining room, formal parlor of the house, and then stopped. And it was very distinct. It sounded like a heavy-set gentleman with leather-soled boots. I do living history, so I'm familiar with that sound. And we have heard those boots, those footsteps, many times.
So you have, it seems, a number of different entities in the house then.
And we've done some research. I'm a historian. The house has quite an interesting history. It was built in 1835 by a War of 1812 veteran. It later served as an Underground Railroad stop, housing runaway slaves. 4 Union Civil War soldiers, American Civil War soldiers, grew up here. And we believe that 2 of the entities are the owners of the house, a man and woman who died in 1863, very close together, we believe, of probably the same fever. And we often hear rustling dresses, and again, the footsteps may well be the gentleman. They're Henry and Margaret Miller, a medium friend of mine, and I'm pretty skeptical of mediums, but this particular woman is very, very good and perceptive. Without visiting the house, speaking on the telephone, she described the room I'm in. She would have no way of knowing what it looks like. And she told me she was seeing a person she believed to be in about 1850s clothing. And she described a window near where I'm sitting and said that there was something below that window, either just outside or just inside the house, that he wanted us to know either we would find or had found that was related to him. Well, my grandson had found a flintlock pistol barrel, military pistol barrel, inside the window of the basement just below that window. Very uncanny. this medium also described a woman entity. And we hear the swishing dress, and that would be Margaret, Henry's wife. The one that is amazing, my wife and I have seen shadows and shadow figures, but no full entities. My grandson has seen an entity outside, a farmer in overalls, a hat, rolled up sleeves, sounded like an older style clothing. My grandson saw him twice, including once when we were hosting a garage sale and had a lot of people around. He about fell off his chair because the gentleman disappeared. I did not see him. He saw him a second time, and we had a visitor who reported the exact same thing, and I don't know any connection how they could know and give the same details. Just incredible.
And you're not at all disturbed by this or frightened. They've never felt threatened or really scared by them.
No, never frightened. Now, we have had about 3 instances of things being thrown. You would call it poltergeist activity.
Yes.
Once my wife had her late father at a pewter beer mug, and she has that on a dresser in our bedroom beside a photo of her parents who are both deceased. And she was getting dressed in the morning, and it's like the pewter mug flew one direction and the photo frame through the other, like somebody put their hands between the two and just flung them. They flew several feet. The picture frame broke. I had installed a sliding door to this office. When I started doing the work, every battery of my 3 electric battery powered drills went dead as soon as I tried to use them, installing the track for this door. I ended up having to use a plug-in drill. The first day after the door was installed, I left my office to have lunch in the other part of the house. I came back and this door was closed, and I was sure I had not closed it. This door is 7 feet tall, about 4 to 5 feet wide, solid oak. It takes a lot of effort to close it. The second day the door was up, the exact same thing happened. I was positive then that I had not closed it. The third day the door was closed again. I opened it, came into the office. I sat down at my desk, and a can of compressed air sitting beside my computer was flung across the room, hit the floor so hard the top broke off. When I went to retrieve that, 2 books came flying off my bookshelf and took out a commemorative mug, breaking it. I immediately said, look, you can be here, we'll share the space, but do not be destroying my things. That happened one other time here in the room months later. It actually threw a clock off my desk right before my eyes. Luckily, it survived the fall.
Now, most people would have run a mile by now.
But the
So
vibes
obviously have a strong constitution for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, the vibes we get are quite pleasant. Usually it's very, I guess, prankish type of activity. One time before we moved in, I was doing plaster work, and I was using latex gloves so my hands wouldn't dry out, patching plaster. I came out after work, having worked the night before, and I had a box of latex gloves, and they were missing. That box was gone from the table. No one else would have been here. I was rather perplexed. So I found I had a box of rather loose-fitting plastic gloves. And this is another time I spoke out loud. I said, look, don't be taking my gloves. I like those gloves. I need those gloves. I don't like these. These don't fit. They're a pain. Give me back my gloves. I used the loose-fitting ones that day. Came back the following afternoon after work, and the latex gloves, the box was back, and the plastic glove box is gone, and to this day we have never found it.
Very good, very good. I understand then that you say you're still a skeptic. How can you be skeptical?
Well, a lot of things that happen can be debunked. We used to hear rustling in the wall that we could not explain, and it was similar to some other rustlings we heard around the house. Doing some work, actually venting the fan from our bathroom, we used the old chimney, to do that, and we discovered several birds that had gotten trapped in the chimney and passed. And we believe that's what we heard. Before we had repaired the house in some spots, we would often hear a whistling, almost, it sounded like a human whistling. But later, doing work in the kitchen, I discovered being there when the wind was blowing just right, it was actually coming through a small hole where the roof and house came together. Once that was repaired, we never heard it again.
But you can't explain the objects being thrown around and the gloves being replaced.
No, there's no explanation. I mean, one time we were working upstairs again before we moved in, we clearly heard someone come in the front door. We heard the door from the hallway to the living room open, steps go across the living room into the dining room below us. We believed somebody from the family or a friend was coming to visit, but we looked outside, there were no cars. And I hollered down the stairs, hello, nothing, walked down, nobody was there. And you can't account for that.
No. In your entire life, you've never had any other strange paranormal type experiences just since you moved into this house or started working on this house?
It turns out that I have had some things earlier in life that I discounted. I just really didn't consider or just didn't want to accept that they might be paranormal. But since working on the house and having those, I have been very involved in the paranormal. I do a lot of research in the paranormal, do a lot of paranormal investigating. I've written 2 books on the subject with a third on the way. And I'm a frequent speaker at, say, paranormal conferences, and I'll speak on the paranormal even at, say, historical societies or Civil War roundtable discussion groups.
And the books are not about the house, though. They're about Gettysburg. Am I correct there?
Yes, I've had a number of experiences in Gettysburg. I used to go there often for strictly historical matters, but now it's usually for the paranormal. And I've done a lot of researching there, had some incredible experiences in Gettysburg. But I do talk about my house in the books as well.
Oh, you do? Okay. Because I saw the books on your website, and it seemed to me they were not related to the house, which puzzled me because it would make a great book, I would imagine, just the story of the house in itself, particularly if you've done a bit of research and can perhaps put a name or identify the characters involved. Usually there's some sort of energy that these entities are utilizing, and usually it's fear or anger or something. But it doesn't seem to me there's any energy being provided by you or anyone else in the house. Would that be correct in terms of emotional energy?
Yes, in terms of like you would associate, say an adolescent with a poltergeist. No, but we do have batteries will go dead, rechargeable batteries. Some days I cannot use any of my tools with rechargeable batteries. That is the main thing. We don't have too much going on with plug-in items, although the activity comes and goes for about 2 or 3 weeks. Recently, we have a radio in our kitchen, and it started turning on by itself. We couldn't account for it. It did this a number of times. The last time it turned on, my wife and I walked in. Sometimes I can sense energies, and I was sensing at that time while we're in the kitchen. The shredder beside my wife's roll-top desk in the dining room turned on by itself. First and only time that has happened. So I think they want our attention at times.
I wonder why they want your attention. As I say, in my experience, quite often they want your attention in order to feed off your natural fear or whatever it is. That's because they make people afraid. And if you're not afraid and they're rather playful and seem to coexist, the question is in their interaction with you, are they trying to communicate or are they just signaling that they are indeed present? Have you any theories on that or any thoughts or any evidence? Or
Yeah, my theory is, they want us to be known. Now, there are times in some of my research and things that have happened where I believe they want their stories told. I had a number of strange occurrences, and this was, I'm talking 25 years ago now. I was researching a book on an American Civil War regiment, and my co-author on this project had run across a letter written by one of the survivors of this regiment many years after the war, and it was reprinted in our local newspaper. Well, my friend made a photocopy of this from the microfilm, and on that same page, down in the corner, was a little notice about a Civil War POW's diary being reprinted in a paper in a nearby town. It was just luck of the draw that was there. I was intrigued. Oh, I was a newspaper man for many years. The publisher of that newspaper was a friend of mine. I called him up and he said, yeah, he'd dig up the old papers. And this diary was run as a serial over a period of many weeks. So I made photocopies of all the entries of the diary. It was absolutely fascinating. This poor gentleman died a horrible death. He basically starved to death in one of the southern prisons during the war. And I did a series in our newspaper about this diary and thought, yeah, I'll have to write a book sometime. Well, my wife and I were in southern Michigan, not far from where we live, celebrating our anniversary. We had done a lot of antiquing, going to antique shops. On the way home, we saw a shop we had missed. And we talked, we don't want to stop. But at the last second, I felt an urge to go inside. So I pulled in, and my wife looked at me funny. I said, well, we'll just go in quickly. And I just feel the urge. So we did go through quickly. As a matter of fact, I was actually going out the front door, but my wife spotted a tintype photograph that caught her eye. It looked like a friend of ours. We do living history. So I came back in, and then I noticed a photograph that I'd missed of a Civil War soldier, a CDV, a small cardboard-backed photo. So I asked to look at it, and the lady gets it out of the case, hands it over. I turned it over on the back, and it was the soldier that I had found the diary.
Wow.
And I thought, this cannot be. It said that he had died in Libby prison. He actually died in a nearby prison in Richmond, Virginia. But I turned it back over, and he was holding his hat, and it had the insignia. It had a 6, an I. He was in the 6th Michigan Company I and Cross Cavalry Sabres. There was no question it was the gentleman. I was stunned.
Yeah, that's a great synchronicity.
Oh, it is. And other things, just things came to light out of the blue as I was researching. I then decided to do the book and did do the book. And it has been a very good seller for me. And it's a fascinating story.
You were a newspaper editor. That's been your career?
Yes, up until about 2 years ago, I retired from that to do book publishing full time and book writing full time.
Your paranormal investigative work, what does that involve? Where do you go to do that? Is it mainly related to this sort of Civil War interest?
Yes, primarily, but not always. I mean, there are places right here. I live in a town of about 10,000 to 11,000 people. I've investigated a number of buildings and sites right here in town that are quite active. And I do a lot in Gettysburg, quite a lot in Gettysburg. But we use, the equipment, various equipment. We do EVPs, we use electromagnetic field meters to sense the energies that you alluded to earlier. A lot of instrumental transcommunication devices, ghost boxes, people call them, to basically getting real, live, real-time EVPs. Those are fascinating.
What's the best sort of evidence that you've experienced outside of your own home, so to speak?
Yeah, and I don't investigate my own home hardly at all because we do have such a good relationship here. I don't want to stir the pot, so to speak. Yeah. But the single best instance that I had led to the title of my first book, I Met a Ghost at Gettysburg. I was there with my grandson, and just to entertain him, we went on a ghost investigation that they provide, normally for a fee, but being registered there as a journalist, they gave me a freebie. We investigated Sachs Bridge. That area was one vast field hospital during the Battle of Gettysburg. And using a ghost box, we had a lengthy communication that involved music. And what's really weird is it was a 2-hour investigation. We got nothing until the final 5 minutes. We ended up staying an extra hour. But the first result we got, the investigator asked, is there anyone with us? And we got a clear 7 or yes. And then she said, how many? And we got a clear 7, 8, 9. And a few more things, and then it died out. So we were going to leave. She went to get the car warmed up. It was a cold evening. And just out of the blue, I thought, if these are Civil War soldiers, what would they be interested in? So I said, do you like jokes? And got a very clear, yes, sir, almost polite. Thought, wow, do you like music? And like, of course, almost like he had been insulted. And my grandson, who was only 14 at the time, he says, can you play for us? So we started getting acoustic guitar music over this. And not little blips like you will get, because these are based on scans, rapid scans of radio stations. And you will get a blip here and there, but these were steady music over several measures. Sounded like period music, although I could not identify the song. And later, a higher pitch, I thought a mandolin, the investigator thought a piano was kicked in. This went on for like 10 minutes. After it finally faded out, I said, wow, you're good. And the very polite voice says, thank you. I said, can you play some more? Says, absolutely. And this time, harmonica joined in. It was amazing. And when that was done, then we started talking. Is anyone with us? Yes. Can you give us your name? And we were getting a name. We couldn't exactly make it out, but it was a clear 3 syllables, a very clear on in the middle, and like a hard sound S at the end. On. And this thing tried like a dozen times. The investigator kept saying, can you enunciate more clearly? Can you pronounce more clearly? We can't understand you. And finally we gave up. And on its own, the voice says, Captain, Captain. Mm-hmm. And I asked the age. I got a 20. And this was, to me, pretty interesting, especially having, at least part of a name. And we had some more conversation. I think there were other entities there. Finally, it was about dying out. And the investigator says, were you hurt? And I'll never forget this. It was a blood-curdling male scream. It still sends chills down my spine, followed by a woman crying. And then we got nothing. So we left. Now, my initial thought was, how are they hoaxing me? They're trying to fool this journalist so they can get a good write-up, for their ghost investigations. The young woman was very knowledgeable, very sincere. And I grilled the poor girl. And when I came home, I was determined to find out how they had hoaxed us, how they had pulled this off. And the more I researched, the more I talked to people, the more I found out, no, you cannot hoax with this machine. You cannot broadcast to it. And the experience, how it worked, getting nothing, getting a lot, and then getting nothing at all, is very common. So I thought, okay, we had a name, and he said he was a captain, and he said he was from Ohio also, by the way. So I thought, were there any Ohio captains killed at Gettysburg? So I researched it. There were indeed 7. One of them's name was Mahlon Briggs, 3 syllables, on in the middle, and hard GS. He was a captain. He was wounded on the first day's fight. He died on the second day of the battle as a prisoner of the Confederates. He quite likely died at Sachs Bridge because that's where they brought their most badly wounded prisoners. Stunning, to say the least.
Very much so. Very much so. Very interesting. And that's in the book.
Yes, it is. I even found his photo, and that's on the cover of the book.
Wow. I manage a website called yourhauntedlife2.com. And it's one of those where people submit their stories. And certainly we have our fair share of Gettysburg stories. But my favorite one, I can't remember who submitted it because of literally thousands of stories now in this website. My favorite one is about the gentleman that took his son or his grandson to Gettysburg, did a look-see. And they kept seeing these people in uniform in the distance with tents and things. And they went out and the lady says, "How was it?" or something like that. And the gentleman turned around and said, "Well, it was really good, especially since you had all those people dressed up, even with the tents and everything out there." And the woman looked at him blankly and said, "What?" Which I think is a really great story. And you say you've got two books. So what's the other book? What was the other book on?
It is really a sequel to the first. It's called I Met More Ghosts at Gettysburg. A journalist's paranormal journey continues.
Interesting. And so this is more of the same sort of reaching out to see who you can make contact with, or?
Yeah, it's I delve a little more into the scientific theories of what's behind it all than in the first book, but it really recounts more of my encounters there and in my historic home.
What sort of theories have you developed from a scientific perspective? Then I'd be interested to hear that.
Well, I think the quantum physics really may hold the best answers. It seems to me that our consciousness does indeed survive our deaths, at least in some cases. I believe electromagnetic energy is involved. You can sense the energies, and if you've been around it, and I have learned often before something happens at the house, I'll feel those energies. And I believe that at least in some cases they can interact with with us, especially with the ITC devices or EVPs. Although sometimes you do hear the actual voices, sometimes you do see the entities. I have seen some amazing entities myself at Gettysburg. They apparently were Confederate soldiers at Little Round Top, and there were probably 24 of them. And they actually were starting to gather around my friend and I as we were standing there. It was, had I not had somebody with me, I would have thought I was hallucinating. But when I can hear somebody relating the same things I'm seeing, that's confirmation.
My father used to tell me a great story about him and his buddy. They used to live in Yorkshire, England, and it's just after the Second World War. And they would escape on a Friday night on their bicycles and take a tent, and they'd spend the entire weekend cycling around Yorkshire and tenting. And they found themselves in a place called Stamford Bridge, which was the site of one of the battles in 1066. And they pitched their tent there and, thinking nothing of it, went to bed. They both woke up in the middle of the night or early in the morning when it was still dark. And at first they thought there was a thunderstorm going on because they could hear these strange crashing and banging sounds and clanging sounds. And they sat there for about an hour, terrified, when they realized that what they were listening to was the sounds of an ancient battle going on, with people screaming and metal against metal and horses and hooves and all of that kind of noise. And of course, when the sun came up and they looked out the door, there was nothing there. But I can imagine that was a pretty scary experience for two young lads in Yorkshire.
That would definitely raise the hairs on the back of my neck.
And what are you going to be doing next? Are you planning on writing more books about paranormal stuff, or doing any other types of investigative work?
Yes, I continue my paranormal investigating. The pandemic has really put a kink in my plans. It's tough to investigate unless you're doing it on your own or with a very small group. The book that I'm working on, some of the research I need is in the archives at the Gettysburg National Military Park. Because of the pandemic, those archives have been closed and will be closed for the foreseeable future. So that book is on hold. It's ironic. You had mentioned that you thought my house would be a good book topic. I may well just do a book now on the house, and also just a general book about paranormal experiences and the theories behind them.
Right at the very beginning, you did remind me of a story here in the Czech Republic that I came across where people were renovating a home, and actually builders were renovating a home, and whatever was there was really not very, very pleased for them to be there. So at one point, the newspaper that covered it, the local Czech newspaper that covered it, has a picture of a round, the round circular saw. It actually left the machine and stuck itself in the wall next to this guy.
Ooh.
So yeah, they never finished the thing. It's still left unfinished, and has a bit of a reputation, as you might imagine. So if Don, if people wanted to know more about you, where would they go for information?
You can go to, actually I have two websites. One is www.fadedbanner.com, like an old flag. That's for my overall publishing. That includes history, some books by others that I edit, such as true crime. I am a newspaper columnist, so I also have books of collections of my best columns. Those are all there. And then imetaghost.com, www.imetaghost.com, is where my paranormal books and information about the paranormal is at that site. And of course, my books are on Amazon and can be obtained through bookstores as well.
What a fascinating conversation that was. That was me talking with Don Allison. He's a lifelong resident of Williams County, Ohio. He's the author of many books, a couple on the paranormal scene in Gettysburg. Please find details about him and where to find his books and find out more about him underneath in the notes around this podcast. I'd like to thank Don for taking the time out to spend some time with me. I'd like to thank you for listening. I'd also like to point out that I have a new book out myself, actually. It's called Watched from the Shadows, Scary True Tales of the Paranormal. It's out as of Sunday, February the 21st. It's out on Kindle and in paperback, and it's a new collection of 30 stories, all sort of set around the theme of that feeling of being watched when there's nobody there. Really good, scary stories. Please do give it a look. Well, if you enjoyed this podcast, do please share it, like it, and follow me on either the YouTube channel or on Spreaker or Spotify or somewhere like that, so that in future you'll get updates. We do put out about 2 editions a month. We're building quite a nice little audience now, but we rely on you and your interest and help to spread the good word. This is G. Michael Vasey. I'd like to thank you for listening. Once again, thanks to Don. Good night.